Hello once again to Notepad's Little Classroom. Today we're going to be talking about something you've probably all seen and probably wondered about. Metacurrencies are a mechanic in which a player or game master receives a currency of some kind to change the nature of the game. This could be simple as re-rolling dice to complex interactions with the actual mechanics, but let's break things down real fast. Meta is referring to itself or in the conventions of its genre. Self-referential, but in this case it's more a Greek definition of denoting something of higher or second order, where we're talking about something a little bit bigger than what's in front of us. If you've ever heard a story being meta, such as Undertale or House of Leaves, then it means it's playing with expectations of you, the enjoyer, as well as your sight with things. Metagaming is knowing information that your character wouldn't know, for example. Currency, however, is a token as means of exchange. The dollar bill, tokens at an arcade, and even the premium thumbucks in your latest gacha. I have X, I want Y, I can spend X to get Y. So a metacurrency is a token of exchange for effects controlled by you, the player, more than anything. But if it was that easy to understand, I wouldn't be here, would I? Because one of the hardest things about a metacurrency is the subsequent meta economy. The acquisition, the expenditure, and the situation that metacurrency finds itself in. Metacurrencies fall into three pretty little categories, mostly because I have a problem with pretty little categories, and it's easier to format these videos with. Fiat metacurrencies are firmly in the hands of the players. Representative metacurrencies are tied to the character, be it physical or metaphysical, and finally commodity currencies, which are backed or mandated by the mechanics of both in-game and the players, of course. Now, it wouldn't be a classroom without the delusional idea for me to sock puppet with. Thus, I present Deep Space Troopers, a tabletop role-playing game about the brave men and women going out into the void of space to fight back the ensuing threats to humanity by any means necessary. Now, let's get to it. To begin with, a fiat metacurrency is not in the hands of the character, but the player and the GM. You've all seen one of these, most likely, probably inspiration from that dragon game. These metacurrencies are built on the idea that the GM, or even the other players, will hand them out to others for the very act of being. Do something cool, here's a good boy point. Perform a heroic action, here's a hero point. Do something that I find interesting, here's an excellency. The name may change, but the core idea is that all of these are in the hands of the players or GM for the players or GM. One of these is the concept of hero points in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Hero points can be handed out to players or by the GM by performing heroic deeds or being entertaining. This can, of course, mean multiple things to multiple GMs. One GM may choose to hand them out frequently to players acting in accordance to their character. Another may only hand them out in very deliberate situations for risky moves or actions in combat. The fiat comes entirely from the idea, the distribution, and the value increases or decreases by that controlling force. Because at the end of the day, a hero point can be spent to do two things: re-rolling a check, with its own issues of course, or stabilizing from being down. Its value is in a unique situation, as it's used for either a niche case or re-rolling checks. Too many hero points and it's re-rolls out for all day. Not enough, and you begin to hoard them for that one moment you need them. But of course, we need another example. In Tidebreaker, the concept of excellence comes up. Excellence is a single-use currency with exactly one per player, but allows you to save yourself from being killed, adding dice, re-rolling dice, and even changing the effects of a very important spotlight moment, which by itself is judged by the players. Its value is incredible, but its distribution is incredibly limited. The meta economy of a fiat currency is very tricky, as it is who gets what, when, where, and how is entirely reliant on the GM or players. A GM handing out cool points every check will have the players flush with them, but if they can only be used to improve a roll by one in very particular situations, you've introduced inflation to the economy. If the GM never hands out a single one, a recession strikes, as the value of the entire section using it becomes actually less valuable. But if the Lord point allows you to instantly succeed at any check and deal 8 gorillion damage to an enemy, a single one can change the entire nature of a game. Now imagine if every player had an instant win button at any time, any place, for any reason. The fiat meta economy is entirely reliant on making calls, when to increase the availability, when to decrease it, most importantly, reacting to situations where the economy is in shambles. Deep Space Troopers' Fiat metacurrency is heroism. The more the squad of troopers acts heroically and charges headfirst into conflict, the more of these hero points they'll actually get from the GM. They can spend it on rerolls or saving trooper lives when they are inevitably attacked and killed. The goal would be to build it up as quickly as possible and cash out as just as fast. But the GM must be vigilant, mostly seeing when a squad is riding a little bit too high, prepare to punish that hubris. A representative metacurrency is tied to the character in question and their abilities. Now, this may seem odd to say, but this is tied to something more akin to a luck stat than anything more direct. This is a personal facet of the character and them, or at least the character receives or benefits from the metacurrency directly by virtue of being them. For example, in Giant Lands, the characters actually have a luck stat. This allows them once per encounter to use their luck to add a raw bonus to their check. So having 50 luck means adding 10% to any target value, which is 10% more likely to succeed. Quite potent in the right hands, but this is rolled, and the character cannot acquire new luck except leveling up, so this is tied to them, not the player. Representative metacurrencies also fall more into the idea that the character has it as a possible physical or metaphysical aspect to them. Another solid example would be Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Fate Points. Creating any character in Warhammer has a character roll for a number of Fate Points they have, usually not many. These not only influence the nature of the character's status as an adventuring hero, but also their ability to ward off death. Fate Points is a character's ability to save themselves from violent ends and is entirely dependent on the race they choose at character creation. Fortune Points are the same way, entirely reliant on the character and their problems for a far smaller bonus, but is actually tied directly to your fate. Creating a meta economy for a representative metacurrency is understanding that a character will need to do something or prevent something from happening. Luck, fate, destiny, or any other factor that is not entirely in the player's control, or abilities that influence the ability to acquire these. Leveling up may award points, players may buy them with experience, earn them by particular actions, or perhaps there is no way to gain them. These are potent, but chaotic for that same reason. The GM cannot directly control the nature of these, as their acquisition and spending is either completely random or in the hands of the player. They make the choice to purchase more good boy points. They make the choice to do something to earn more. They make the choice to represent how valuable or worthless they truly are. Fate points in Warhammer Fantasy are ultimately useless. They do not contribute directly to your survival. They don't give you bonuses or anything like that. Except the second you are on death's door, then they're the most valuable thing to you. Designers need to be careful on what these do and how they work and how you acquire them. Too valuable and you've given them the opportunity to break your entire system. Too weak and it's just another thing to manage and maybe never use. Deep Space Troopers' representative currency is guts, representing the squad's bravado, intrinsic patriotism to push them farther. They may not be the best fighters or even how good at building anything, but they're determined and able to receive little bonuses every mission to make up for whatever they are lacking. However, this currency is an inconsistent and intoxicating substance, building your confidence when you need it, but never really when you really need it. The final type of metacurrency is perhaps one of the most contentious. Commodity metacurrency can best be described as the necessity one, as the game simply ceases to function should the currency not be present. This could be based around a single set of mechanics, or hell, the entire foundation of the game. The core conceit of this is simple. The currency is the game. The acquisition, the expenditure, the hoarding, all is such a foundational building block of how the game is built. Let's take something like Orun, the Agbara. Tied to each of the auras of the character has and also contributes to rolls, saves, defenses, and everything else a character can do is related to that particular metacurrency. Without the Agbara, they were helpless. With it, they just may save themselves. This does lead to the fact that the commodity and representative are often similar, but there's a very key difference. Representative currencies are not required to play the game. You can remove fate points as an idea and Warhammer will function. You can remove the concept of guts from Deep Space Troopers and the game would still function. But if you remove Abba from a rune, the game stops working at a base level. But let's take a look at something else, an interesting and maybe less interesting method. Recently we went over a game called Jackals and the Clash Point system. Fundamentally speaking, Clash Points allow the characters to seize initiative, protect themselves, or chip away at the health of the enemies easier. It is an accelerant to the character's actions, and the acquisitions of these points is consistent and allows PCs to keep the fight up as fast and as hard as they can. A less well-developed idea is Fabula Points from Fabuloso Ultimax. Fabuloso Points are fairly consistently gamed, often through botching rolls or playing the game. Entire sections of your character, though, such as history and relationships, are actually locked behind the use of these Fabuloso points, forcing the PC to acquire them to actually use their character as they are. So what's the difference between these two? Jackals wants you to actively use Clash Points in combat, both restricting and demanding their use in the field, but they are never mandatory to use either. You don't need to defend yourself as you're making the choice to power through an attack to deal a heavier one at the enemy. You don't need to sweep if you're feeling more paranoid about protecting yourself. But in Fabula, not only can you use these points to build indefinitely, they also are the only way to invoke traits or bonds, fundamental parts of your character that are important, so you will have to fumble checks or just wait to get them, or of course you can lose to get them. The GM doesn't need to manage your Clash Points, you manage them. The GM must manage your Fabuloso points, of course, as if you don't, players may inflate the economy or find that their actual character is moot. Overall, the commodity metacurrency is built around the mechanics more than even representative currencies. They are the system, they are the economy, they are what the players will obsess and manage. And if they aren't valuable, the system begins to fall apart. Worse yet, if they are too valuable and the acquisition too slow, then hoarding may occur as the players begin to obsess over the acquisition and acquiring more and more and more of their little precious, rather than ever actually using them, thus failing to engage with the system. Deep Space Troopers with a commodity metacurrency is in the form of supply. Every time you need to reload, build new defenses, or call in bombardments, they're reducing their supplies. They have to use them if they don't want to suffer attrition in the field or get completely overrun by the horde of bugs trying to gnaw on their bones. But it's always dwindling, with every mission having to pre-assign amount of these good boy points. And of course, being a bit greedy should always be rewarded. Spend one more than you need. Better you survive than die, right? Overall, metacurrencies are all about the manipulation and understanding of that internal meta economy. How do you acquire these currencies? How much do you spend them? How do you hoard them? What happens when we run out? What happens when we have too much? Adding a metacurrency to any game becomes now a game of understanding that economy and how balancing it. If you want to have an active commodity currency that fuels the hectic combat, great, but know how it works now and the flow it now introduces to that combat. Are players being overly protective of their new representative currency? Ask why, inquire deeper. Oh, it's the only way to succeed at certain checks. Oh, it's their way of winning encounters. Oh, it's the only way to stop death and they'll never have enough. Maybe it's a little bit time to tweak. And even a fiat currency, which has no value and is handed out to modify exterior mechanics no one engages with, maybe it's time to give it something to do. What does it affect if you do give it that little bonus? Is it too much? Too little? Understanding the who, what, where, when, and how is the key to keeping your metacurrency from causing a meta-economic collapse. There is no right way to do it. While I may roll my eyes at some, the truth of the matter is that I'm a hoarder in that regard. I want to optimize upwards. I want to find the best way to get more out of less. I hate spending something I can't get back. But other players may be spend happy, others may forget, others may carefully ration every single point they have. But that's the beauty of design. You'll never know until you try it. My name is Notepad Anon, and this was my little classroom episode 5. If you like what I do here, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Many thanks to Plutocrats as always for funding my descent into madness. Godspeed, good luck, and always remember that service guarantees citizenship.
This is a journey into money. Loads of money.